Joining us on the Yuma guest line to chop it up and talk all things Niners is Chase Sr. from Chat Sports, who does an amazing job. Chase doesn't just cover the Niners, he covers the Eagles as well, so it's almost a perfect time to have him on the leader and chop it up on all things Niners and maybe even look ahead to Super Bowl 59 coming up this week in New Orleans. Chase, thanks for the time. Thanks for jumping on.
Larry, always good to talk Niners with you, talk football with you, especially here on KNBR, so let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. So I thought the biggest story, well, first of all, let's go with the breaking story of the day, and that is that the 49ers are interviewing D'Angelo Hall as a potential defensive backfield coach. Would he replace Daniel Bullocks? Would he complement Daniel Bullocks? Would Bullocks work for Hall? Would Hall work for Bullocks? There's a lot of unknowns at this point. But what do you think of the news that the 49ers plan to interview D'Angelo Hall? Do you think this is a Robert Saleh, led, interview, or what do you think? The Niners obviously love Johnny Holland. They don't want to change him out. They love Chris Kasarik. If they're going to have any change at all on their defensive staff, it probably would make sense that it would come on the back end. What do you think of Hall interviewing with the Niners?
Yeah, pretty interesting stuff. It's been exactly a week since the Niners officially brought back Robert Saleh to be the team's next defensive coordinator and taking over for Nick Sorensen. And there's really not been a lot of chatter about what he's going to do with his staff. But what we do know is that Robert Saleh is going to be the head coach of the defense. He's going to have some personnel say. Of course, he's going to have say as to who works under him with his assistant coaches. And I trust his evaluations with players, with developing prospects and free agents, with some of the players who are already on this roster, and his eye for coaching talent, because that's part of the reason why Robert Saleh is one of the top defensive minds in football. He's able to check off all of those boxes. And with Saleh arguably being the highest paid defensive coordinator in the National Football League, and that was some of the chatter too before the Niners officially brought him in, it's going to allow Kyle Shanahan to focus on the offense. Brant Boyer, who's going to follow Saleh from the Jets, is going to focus solely on special teams. And Saleh's going to run this defensive unit. And as part of that, I think he's going to have draft say. He's going to have some pull as far as the players who the Niners sign in free agency. He wants to put his fingerprints on this defense. And it's a little bit different from the last time that he was here. He's been a head coach. He has the chops. He's well regarded and respected across the National Football League. And so if he wants to bring in a coach like D'Angelo Hall, who decided to part ways with the Carolina Panthers, a mutual decision there, I think that it could be a good hire. What does it mean for Daniel Bullocks? I'm not sure, because I think that he's done a really good job in developing some defensive backs on this team the last couple of years, and even this year. We saw a lot of growth as a rookie from Renardo Green. Diamador Lenore played at a Pro Bowl, all-pro type of level. Malik Mustafa was inserted as a rookie starting safety. He's a bowling ball back there, making hits at all three levels. He's a ball hawk, and I'm a really big believer in his talent. But we'll see what happens with Bullocks. Is Hall just going to come in as an assistant? That just adds depth to your coaching staff. We're talking about a three-time Pro Bowler here, or is he going to be a DB's coach? I know that the Niners could miss Bullocks, but if you bring in Hall, I think Saleh looks at him as an up-and-coming, blossoming coach in the industry.
I wonder how much say Daniel Bullocks has had the last couple of years on some of their decisions, because I think they've made some really bad decisions. Let's go through three of them. They had Jimmy Ward. He was absolutely one of their alphas in the room. And they let him walk to the, in free agency, and he didn't even get paid. I mean, it was like 1 year, $6 million. You let one of your heart and soul defenders who's great against the run and pass, you let him walk for nothing, and you never really replaced him. That was screw up number one. Screw up number two was last year you cut Deshaun Jameson in camp to keep Isaiah Oliver. I mean, that was a horrible decision. I don't know if it was related to Steve Wilks. Wilks got kind of credited or blamed with that decision. But then fast forward this year, they signed Rock Ya-Sin and Isaac Yiadom, and they wind up cutting Samuel Womack III, who went to Indianapolis and outplayed Rock Ya-Sin and Isaac Yiadom, and he's a younger, cheaper, better player. And then, Renardo Green is a dog and played great, and Lenore is an incredible player. But, I didn't see any development at all from Jair Brown, and I'm still waiting for Darrell Luter, who's got huge size and speed and talent, to even make any impact at all and get on the field. So on one hand, I want to credit Bullocks, but then they've made some dubious decisions the last 3 years, and to me, those three moves have hurt them significantly on the back end.
I agree. And that's part of the reason why once Saleh got fired by the New York Jets a few months ago, I was talking about this on the 49ers report, find a way to bring him back if he doesn't get a head coaching job elsewhere. And obviously the stars aligned. He didn't get that Jags job because Liam Cohen, the Bucs offensive coordinator, did that U-turn at the last moment. But a great coach like Robert Saleh is going to do a better job than Nick Sorensen of putting together a game plan with the scheme, making adjustments, maximizing players, putting them in a position to succeed, but developing players as well. And so I need to see Jair Brown get back on track because what he did as a rookie, stepping in for Talanoa Hufanga, was impressive. I want to continue to see Diamador Lenore play at an all-pro level. You gave him nearly $90 million. I think he's worth every penny. Renardo Green was a lockdown corner on the outside, one of the highest graded corners among all players at that position this year. Darrell Luter Jr., I'm with you. He has length. He has size. And the Niners under Kyle Shanahan have played zone, the number one rate in the NFL. I think they need to play a little bit more press man. I think they need to get more creative and exotic. They can't let the offense's job be so easy like it was last year and some of the dubious play calls that we saw. And the Niners want to get faster, more athletic, and they want to get more exotic. They want to make some changes on the defensive side of the ball. And I think that starts with Robert Saleh right now, personnel-wise, coaching-wise right now, and developing some of the players who are already on this roster.
John Lynch has been in Mobile all week. Mike Lombardi, who's now with Belichick and the North Carolina Tar Heels, said the buzz around the Senior Bowl in Mobile is that the Niners may be sleepers in the free agency bidding on T. Higgins, which obviously gets rolling on March the 12th when free agency begins. He also named the Pats, the Commanders, the Texans, and the Chargers as teams that are interested as well. This, to me, is really interesting because the 49ers, we all know, do the Niners need to upgrade their D-line? Yeah. Do they need to upgrade their O-line? Yeah. Do they need to upgrade their linebackers? Yeah. Do they need more depth at tight end? Yeah. But the wide receiver question is the most complicated question because you paid Ayuk, but you don't know what you're getting out of him in 2025 because you have Debo, and I don't know if there's a financial incentive to part ways, but he looks like he's regressed. There's a lot of people that think he could be traded. Pearsall was not very good until the end of the year. Cowling didn't really bust out. So it's not a great draft for wide receivers. I can't really see them taking one early. So in a lot of ways, if they want to get a significant player at wide receiver, T. Higgins might be the way to go. They've gone all in on a singular free agent in the past with Hargrave. It didn't work well. But, man, Higgins is a special player. 12 games this year, 73 catches, 10 touchdowns, 911 yards playing in the shadow of Jamar Chase. He had a game at the end of the year that was just absolutely ridiculous. He looked like one of the best receivers in football, Higgins did. What do you think? How realistic do you think is it that the Niners, who have $50 million of cap room, some of it earmarked for Purdy, obviously, how realistic they spend some of that other cap room on Higgins?
Yeah, and with Hargrave, they signed him coming off an 11-sack season after the 2022 run for Philadelphia, and he was like 31 years old, whereas T. Higgins is a player who is 26 years old. So you get a young player who's been a touchdown machine. He's 6'4", go up and get it type of guy, complete route tree. You can utilize him in the red zone, but you can utilize him inside the 20s. And I think with more targets, more opportunities, when he's not playing alongside Jamar Chase, you can see an uptick in production. But Larry, that production's been really good. Every year he's been in the league, 6 touchdowns, 6, 7, 5, and 10. He has 2 1,000-yard seasons, year 2, year 3, and then 2 more 900-yard seasons in year 1 and here in 2024. And so the wide receiver question, as you mentioned, is very interesting because you paid Brandon Ayuk, but then he shredded up his knee. You are not sure what he's going to be coming off of that injury because it was very severe. Juwan Jennings, you gave him a contract extension through 2025, but that's an expiring deal for him. Deebo Samuel is entering the final year of his deal. You have Ricky Pearsall, you have Jacob Cowing, but those rookies are unknown commodities. And if you pay Brock Purdy, you ideally want to know what his receiving core is going to be around him if you're making that investment. Oh, no, yeah, George Kittle is entering the final year of his contract in 2025 as well. So I don't think it's all too likely that the Niners splurge on T. Higgins when they have such great needs at greater positions of need, like offensive line, left guard, center, right tackle, defensive line, defensive tackle, edge rusher. You need to bulk up that defense at linebacker, corner, maybe safety. Running back is a concern too, though. So that's what kind of brings me back to offense. You have all of these unknowns and question marks on offense, yet you want to pay Purdy, who you saw in 2024 needs complementary pieces around him. The draft class is weak at wide receiver. The free agency class is thin at wide receiver. And so if you think wide receiver is a great need, we know the Niners team building philosophy. They want players who score touchdowns. T. Higgins is interesting in free agency, and Tyler Warren at tight end is interesting at 11 for those reasons if they want a playmaker who can change the game on the offensive side of the football.
Tim Kawakami had a note yesterday. It's more likely at 11 the Niners go with their basic plan. Take somebody who can rush the passer or somebody who can score touchdowns, one or the other. And the likeliest position for number 11 in this draft seems to be a defensive tackle. This is what Tim wrote yesterday, or somebody's quoting a pod that he was on. Walter Nolan, Kenneth Grant, Derek Harmon, maybe Mason Graham. I mean, they could be looking at some very good defensive tackles there for sure. But then, the skill position, it's like how do you turn your team around fast? Well, some people say build up a line of scrimmage. But to me, if you really want to build up your team faster, you change the guys who touch the football. And those guys define your team. At 11, Teteroa McMillan, who was Jacob Cowing's teammate at Arizona, some of the mocks have him falling to 11. I don't think it's going to happen. Ashton Gianti, the best running back from Boise in the country, in an incredible deep running back draft. He's probably there at 11. You mentioned Tyler Warren, who I look at and say, that's Gronk. That is Gronk 2.0 if I've ever seen it. The Penn State tight end is awesome. Big, strong, fast. He's probably going to be there at 11, probably, but not necessarily. And then there's Luther Burden from Missouri. So what do you think at 11? Do you think it's, some people say it's offensive tackle, other people say defensive tackle, and now Tim has thrown out maybe even skill position options. Where's your lean at 11 here on the 31st of January?
Yeah, so a few players that kind of come to mind, like my dream draft targets for the Niners, Abdul Carter, Mason Graham. I don't think those players are going to be available. At offensive tackle, you look at Kelvin Banks from Texas, Will Campbell from LSU, Armand Membu out of Missouri is looked at as a sure thing, but he's a little bit of a tweener. Not sure if he's going to be a tackle or a guard, but you do have a need at guard. And then at edge rusher, do you go with one of the Georgia players? Do you go with Mike Green out of Marshall? Do you go Walter Nolan, Ole Miss? You could do that. You could go with Kenneth Grant, who is Mason Graham's sidekick at that defensive tackle spot. I've been pounding the table a little bit for Tyler Warren over the last couple of months, at least floating that possibility. Look, if you don't want to pay George Kittle top dollar, he's going into the final year of his deal, and you want to run 2 tight end sets, add another weapon for this year. And by the way, Tyler Warren can play H-back. He can play out of the slot. He can play out wide. Shoot, he lined up at center. He lined up at quarterback. I'd love to see how Kyle Shanahan can utilize a player like that, where in 2025, you're able to use 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets, and then if you let Kittle walk, it'd be hard. It'd be an emotional decision, but financially it could make sense. Maybe you cut a Kyle Juszczyk to save $4.5 million, and you have Tyler Warren as your fullback. Like, these are the options and the things that the Niners are having to think about. I do go back to this. I'm a firm believer you build your teams in the trenches after you get the quarterback position right. The Niners have their quarterback in Brock Purdy, in my estimation. They have to get better along the offensive line and defensive line. Look at the 2 teams in the Super Bowl right now. Philadelphia's loaded up front on both sides. Kansas City is as well. Look at the teams you're competing with and against in the NFC. Detroit, loaded up front on both sides of the line of scrimmage. Green Bay, Philadelphia, Minnesota, Washington got better up front. Like, that's where the Niners are weak. That's where the Niners need to improve. So I would personally go offensive line, defensive line in round 1.
Yeah, and you've advocated for Drew Dahlman. Matt Mayoko threw Drew Dahlman's name out there as well. As obviously his dad played for the Niners, Chris Dahlman, and Drew's in Atlanta in a very similar scheme. And the Niners have made a significant investments at center, so we know they kind of value good centers. I was kind of indicating. Someone said to me they're probably going to do the line in the draft and do other positions in free agency, but if it came down to Higgins or Drew Dahlman, you voting for Drew Dahlman or you want the wide receiver?
I would go Drew Dahlman. I think he's cheaper. I think it's a bigger position of need. He too is pretty young and he's a great scheme fit. Zach Robinson worked under Sean McVay. He was the offensive coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons this year. And so there's scheme familiarity there. The Niners have splurged on centers in the Kyle Shanahan era. They gave a bag to Weston Richburg. They paid Alex Mack some decent coin. Jake Brendel is just one of the worst centers in the NFL. And in this offense, you need a good center. I thought what Brian Baldinger said a couple of weeks ago, your offensive line isn't good without a good center. And so Jake Brendel is not going to cut it. And so I think that you can get by with the run game and with the existing wide receiver talent that's currently on this team. Maybe you draft another player, but you can't get by if you don't get better at center and along the offensive line. So I'd go Dahlman because he's a scheme fit. He too is young. He's going to be cheaper. And I think offensive line is a bigger position of need than T. Higgins at wideout.
Yeah, I think Drew Dahlman's only 26. He's been in the league, but he's only 26.
That played for the Niners too.
Yeah, and then was a great Niner and played at Stanford, and Drew played at Stanford, and there's probably lots of reason to believe that Drew might want to come back to the Bay Area since he did go to college here. Eric Armstead supposedly texted or sent a message to Fred Warner saying, "Dang, I'm jealous." About Robert Saleh being the Niners' new DC. Armstead said, Saleh's one of the best coaches I've ever played for. He's truly a special coach. Schematically, he's elite. Is Robert Saleh's coattails going to include more than Brant Boyer and D'Angelo Hall? Well, do you think there's some players out there? I bring this up because if you go to Niners Nation today, you did a video on this on Chat Sports. I did a video on the Crew Show on this. The 5 or 6, jet free agents that potentially could come with Robert Saleh. I threw Chaz Surratt, who's a fast young linebacker, but Jamie Sherwood has had a great year and really flourished under Saleh. And now there's some speculation that maybe Sherwood could come to the Niners in free agency. Jeremy Fowler reporting that, he said, watch out for the Atlanta Falcons and the 49ers as a potential home for Jamie Sherwood, who had 18 tackles in the Miami game earlier this year. He had 17 in another game. He's 6'2", 216 pounds. He's not the biggest guy. He was a safety at Auburn, but man, this guy has absolutely he flourished. He's repped by Drew Rosenhaus, who has a great relationship with the 49ers. He represented Frank Gore for years. Spotrac is projecting Jamie Sherwood to make about $7.2 million annually. What do you think? Does Sherwood fit? And what would you think if they could get Greenlaw, Warner, and Jamie Sherwood all on the same defense? That would be exciting.
Yeah, and I agree with Eric Armstead. Robert Saleh is a special coach, and Armstead knows that. He had his lone double-digit sack season when Saleh was the defensive coordinator that Super Bowl year back in 2019 when Armstead had 10 of them. Jamie Sherwood is a player who I really like, and the Niners as an organization have valued linebackers who have a defensive back background, and Jamie Sherwood has a defensive back background. You see that with the tenacity, the speed, the feel, and the instincts that he has. And oh yeah, he's become a really good player under the watchful eye and the tutelage of Robert Saleh. And so players respect Saleh. They think he's a special defensive mind, and they look at teaming up with him as an opportunity to really flourish and continue their careers. And for Sherwood, not only can he follow Saleh, he knows the scheme, he knows the DC. He can team up alongside Fred Warner and potentially Dre Greenlaw, and an easy fix for this Niners defense. And we saw how much they desperately missed Dre Greenlaw this year. You secure that second level. If you bring back Greenlaw on an affordable contract, prove it deal with the Achilles injury that he had to deal with, that he's still coming off of, that he kind of re-injured once he did try to come back late in the year. And then you have Jamie Sherwood at that other linebacker spot. And so you go from this year having Fred Warner, Devondre Campbell and Demetrius Flanagan foul/D winners to potentially having Fred Warner, Sherwood, Greenlaw with D winners and Jalen Graham as backups, and maybe you draft another backer. Maybe you bring in a Chaz Surratt who improves your special teams unit, who can also play linebacker. That's how you rebuild really quickly and smartly. And I think that's the route that the Niners kind of have to go. They have to think about things in that manner.
We're talking to Chase Sr. from Chat Sports on the Uma Guest Line as we talk a little Niner football. We got two last ones for him, and then we'll let him get on with his night. Tim Kawakami, God bless Tim Kawakami. He's giving us all kinds of content. He wrote a thing yesterday saying that Brock Purdy about his contract extension, that the Niners camp and Purdy's camp are feeling like there won't be fireworks on the way to an eventual deal. That's great news. He also said that maybe the framework of the deal might be a little different than some of the other recent quarterback deals, maybe shorter term, maybe a little bit less guaranteed. And then he finishes up by saying, it's still, nobody's going to make their best effort right away, and this whole negotiation could take time. That last line makes me really nervous because I don't think the Niners. I think the Niners have a new deadline. I think it's March 12th. I think when free agency starts, they have to have their deal with Purdy done. Otherwise, they can't go after a T. Higgins or Drew Dahlman or Jamie and Sherwood or anybody else. I think that March 12th, I would say, is the early deadline that I would want that Purdy deal done, just because you got to know what you have to play with cap-wise when you go into the free agent market. And if you don't have your biggest contract settled, man, you're kind of taking a risk in free agency, are you not?
Yeah, for sure. And I don't think that this deal is going to get done along the same timeline when the Niners signed Jimmy Garoppolo. That was the last big money deal that they gave to a quarterback. That was in the first or second week of February. But I do think that that benchmark is pretty important for the start of free agency and the start of the new league year for just a couple of reasons. You know then that Brock Purdy is going to be on hand for OTAs and minicamp. The Niners don't want him missing those. You can't go about it without your quarterback. And Brock Purdy, knowing the importance that he plays with this team and the role that he has, doesn't want to miss those offseason activities and those practices either. And then it also gets your cap in a situation where you know what your cap situation is going into free agency. I don't think that you hire Saleh and Brant Boyer to not be aggressive and go all in for 2025. And it gives free agents an idea of what they can expect if you sign these offensive free agents for the foreseeable future as well. And so I think it's really important for the Niners to get this deal done early, because then you know what your plan is going to be without any question marks around Purdy.
Eagles and Chiefs, second time in 3 years. You covered the Eagles. They've had a dramatic turnaround. They got absolutely knocked out of the playoffs last year by Tampa. They looked terrible. The past team was terrible, but they brought in Fangio. They brought in a new offensive coordinator. They drafted Cooper DeJean. They added Quinyon Mitchell. Jalen Carter has had an incredible bust-out year. Zach Bond has gone from just a guy to a all-pro type linebacker. I want to pick Kansas City just because it's easier to just give the nod to Reed and Mahomes, and I just can't stand the Eagle fans. But if I just separate my own personal feelings about the Eagle fans for a second, I like the Eagles here. I really do. I think they're going to run the ball on Kansas City. I think Philadelphia learned a lot in that matchup last time. I think Hurts will play a cleaner game. He had a costly fumble in the last matchup. I like the Eagles to run the ball better, and I know other teams have run the ball well against Kansas City, and Kansas City still prevails, but not this time. Not against Fangio's number one defense. I like the Eagles on the money line in Super Bowl 59. Give me your breakdown on this thing.
Yeah, everybody listening to the show, first of all, if you're looking for a blueprint for how the Niners can come back strong in 2025, look at Philadelphia. Both teams lost to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. Both teams had Super Bowl hangovers. Both teams absolutely collapsed late in the year. Both teams underwent some coaching changes. Eagles, Niners, Kellen Moore, Vic Fangio, Robert Saleh, Brant Boyer. And then the Eagles did very well in the draft and in free agency. So the Niners are not far off. If they do well in the draft and in free agency, they get healthy, they improve offense, defense, special teams with coaching changes to getting back to playoff contention and championship contention this upcoming season in 2025. As far as this matchup goes, the Eagles are better everywhere except for quarterback, head coach. Now, obviously, those are the two most important positions. Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Nick Sirianni, Jalen Hurts. But the Eagles are better than they were in 2022, especially on defense. Far better on the defensive side of the ball. Number one overall defense in the game. I think the Eagles can control the offensive line and the defensive line. They're better there. I think that Hurts, if he plays like he did in the NFC Championship game, Eagles win. And they're not going to be able to turn the football over if it's close late. The Chiefs have won 17 straight one-score games. But I just think the talent gap can win in a big game like this outside of quarterback and head coach. And I think the Eagles can slay the dragon here and win.
Everybody follow Chase on X. It's at Chase_senior. Go to New Orleans. Get some fried alligator. Get a couple beignets.
I will.
Throw a few back in the French Quarter for yours truly. Really let it go, man. No minor league stuff. I mean, I'm expecting top-notch partying from I would say 10 p.m. to. I'm thinking if it's New Orleans, you really shouldn't be getting back to your place where you're staying until about 4 a.m.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Super Bowl week to round out what has been a very busy and successful football season for me with my coverage standpoint. I'm going to live up to the moniker, work hard, play hard, right? I'm going to be at Radio Row from 8 a.m. And then, when you're done, you got to go out and experience the French Quarter and Bourbon Street and Frenchman Street. You got to take down some hand grenades and listen to some really good music. So we're going to do all of that, and I can't wait for it.
Niner fans, if you see Chase Sr. in the quarter, buy this man a beer. He's done endless content for you guys over the last few years. Chase, have an awesome time in New Orleans. Good luck to your Eagles. It's against everything that I believe in to say that, but I just did. Have a great night. Thanks for coming on KNBR and breaking it all down for us.
Always a blast to come on here. Yep, appreciate it.
Chase Sr. From Chat Sports. And once again, I mean it. If you see him in the quarter, buy this man a beer. We'll continue with more. It's Niners Nightly on a Friday on the Sports Leader.